on MadPod.com. Nightmare in Amityville. The Ronald DeFeo story, Death in the Family. A documentary recounting the infamous Long Island, New York slayings, which set the stage for the 1979 blockbuster, The Amityville Horror. The first no-holds-barred public interview with original Amityville homeowner George Lutz since 1969. The first ever interview with convicted murderer Ronald DeFeo's wife Tracy from Greenville, South Carolina. Nightmare in Amityville. The Ronald DeFeo story. Death in the Family. With Shadoe Steele. Coming soon to MadPod.com.
Hey, this is JADonnelly, MadPod.com, and in celebration of my birthday, 060606, we're going to run the Shadoe Steele Amityville Horror Special. Here is Part 1, MadPod.com.
Nightmare in Amityville, the Ronald DeFeo story. Death in the Family with Shadoe Steele. The guests: Tracy DeFeo, WNEW-TV Channel 5 New York investigative reporter Laura Didio, Hans Holzer, internationally renowned psychic researchers the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine, and psychic sleuth Mary Downey. Special guest George Lutz. Nightmare in Amityville, the Ronald DeFeo story. Death in the Family with Shadoe Steele. Ronald DeFeo Sr. had attained a trophy-sized piece of the American dream when he purchased the house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, Long Island. Having been born and raised in Brooklyn, Ronald had worked hard at his father-in-law's Buick dealership, and after many years began to reap rich benefits. Money was no longer a concern when he finally made the decision to leave the city and move to Long Island's South Shore. The home he chose was a classic piece of Americana. 2 stories plus an attic, and a boathouse on the Amityville River. There was plenty of room for him, his wife Louise, and 4 children. A signpost in the front yard read, "High Hopes," a testament to what the new home had symbolized for the DeFeos. But beneath the veneer of success and happiness, Ronald was a hot-tempered man, given to bouts of rage and violence. There were stormy fights between he and Louise, and he loomed before his children as a demanding authority figure. As the eldest child, Ronald Jr. bore the brunt of his father's temper and expectations. As a young boy, Ronald Jr., or Butch as he would come to be called, was overweight and sullen, the victim of schoolyard taunts and quite unpopular with other children. His father encouraged him to stick up for himself, but while his advice pertained to the treatment of schoolyard bullies, it apparently did not apply to how young Ronald was treated at home. Ronald Sr. had no tolerance for backtalk and disobedience, keeping his eldest son on a short leash and refusing to let him stand up for himself the way he was commanded to act at school. As Butch matured into adolescence, he gained in size and strength and was no longer a sitting duck for his father's abuse. Shouting matches often degenerated into boxing matches, as father and son came to blows with little provocation. While Ronald Sr. was not highly skilled in the art of interpersonal relations, he was astute enough to realize that his son's bouts of temper and violent behavior were highly irregular, even in relation to his own. He and his wife arranged for their son to visit a psychiatrist, but to no avail, as Butch simply employed a passive-aggressive stance with his therapist and rejected any notion that he himself needed help. In the absence of any other solution, the DeFeos employed a time-honored strategy for placating unruly children. They started buying Butch anything he wanted and giving him extra money. At the age of 14, his father presented him with a $14,000 speedboat to cruise the Amityville River. Whenever Butch wanted money, all he had to do was ask. And if he wasn't in the mood, he simply took it. By the age of 17, Butch was forced to leave the parochial school he was attending. By this time, he had begun using serious drugs such as heroin and LSD, and had also started dabbling in petty thievery schemes. His violent behavior was becoming increasingly psychotic as well, and was not confined to outbursts within his home. One afternoon, while out on a hunting trip with some friends, he pointed his loaded rifle at a member of the party, a young man he had known for years. He watched with a stony expression as the young man's face turned white. He fled, and Butch calmly lowered his gun. When they caught up with their friend later that afternoon, Butch asked him why he had left so soon. At the age of 18, Butch was given a job at his grandfather's Brooklyn Buick dealership. By his own account, it was a gravy job where little was expected of him. Regardless of whether or not he showed up for work, he received a cash allowance from his father at the end of each week. This he used for his car, which his parents had also purchased, for alcohol and for drugs such as speed and heroin. Altercations with his father were growing ever more frequent and correspondingly more violent. One evening, a fight broke out between Mr. and Mrs. DeFeo. In order to settle the matter, Butch grabbed a 12-gauge shotgun from his room, loaded a shell into the chamber, and charged downstairs to the scene of the altercation. Without hesitating or calling out to break up the fight, Butch pointed the barrel of the gun at his father's face, yelling, "Leave that woman alone. I'm going to kill you. You fat fuck. This is it." Butch pulled the trigger, but the gun mysteriously did not go off. Ronald Sr. froze in place and watched in grim amazement as his own son lowered the gun and simply walked out of the room with casual indifference to the fact that he had almost killed his father in cold blood. That fight was over, but Butch's actions foreshadowed the violence he would soon unleash not only upon his father, but his entire family.
Don't get mad. Get media. MadPod.
Nightmare in Amityville. The Ronald DeFeo story. Death in the Family with Shadoe Steele continues. In her first radio interview ever, from Westminster, South Carolina, Ronald's wife, Tracy DeFeo.
Joining us live from Westminster, South Carolina, Ronald DeFeo's wife, Tracy. Welcome, Tracy. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
Tracy, now firstly, my best wishes to you and Ronald. You are a newlywed of sorts, wed in April. How did you begin your relationship with Ron? Now, I would think through the mail, but what sparked your interest in befriending Ronald DeFeo?
Well, I met my husband when I traveled to New York with one of my friends to meet her husband. And Ronald was in the visiting room with a friend, and we were introduced, and we started our correspondence afterwards.
Now, you obviously have a solid bond of trust in Ron, Tracy.
Yes, I trust my husband completely, and over the years he's been labeled a pathological liar. You know, he can't be trusted, but that's the furthest thing from the truth.
What did you know about the sensational Amityville slayings case before you started to get involved with Ronald, Tracy?
Absolutely nothing. The only thing that I've seen is the Amityville horror movie, and that was basically it.
Now, Tracy, I must ask, did the notoriety of the DeFeo family case bother you a little bit at first?
No, not really. I just, I really don't know that much about it, and I didn't know anything about any of this until I met my husband, and, that's about it. The only thing I know is about the Amityville movies.
Tracy, tell us about Ron. What was he like when you first began to correspond with him? Was he standoffish at first, or was he willing to make a new friend?
No, he was really wanting to meet a new friend. He's very sweet, very caring. He lavishes gifts on me and my children, and he's just a very caring, wonderful man.
How did your relationship grow after you met him?
Well, I visit my husband once a month. I travel to New York, and it's usually about 7-8 days, and we talk on the phone maybe 4 or 5 times a week. We write every day.
Tracy, what do you do for a living, and when was the first time you met Ron after traveling from South Carolina to New York?
Well, I'm an in-home health nurse, and I traveled to New York. I think the first time I met Ronnie was about the end of 2002.
Now, you're embroiled in a lawsuit in progress. I realize you can't go into the actual specifics of the matter, but bring us up to speed on what prompted this legal action, Tracy.
Well, there is a pending lawsuit with the publishers and the writer of the book, The Night the DeFeos Died, and the book is, it has a lot of inaccuracies about it, so my husband is suing the publishers and the writer of this book. That's about all I can really comment on that.
Nightmare in Amityville. The Ronald DeFeo story. Death in the Family with Shadoe Steele.
Don't forget to subscribe to our feed and check out other shows at MadPod.com, SexyCelebrityInterviews.com, and our tech show, Techie2.com. For now, I'm JADonnelly. Come back again. Dang.